Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Bibbidi Bobbidi Books. My name is Ellie and today I am so excited to be bringing you a spoiler-free review of one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and that book is Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. Now this is a blood-soaked epic fantasy novel. It's the first in a series and it's an absolute chunker, and this was pitched as the dark vampire story that we've all been waiting for, and let me tell you, it delivered. I thought this book was fantastic, but I'm gonna say right off the bat, if you don't like bloody gory stuff and if you don't like swearing, then steer clear of this book because there is a lot of that in this novel, so just be warned before you go in. But yes, I really enjoyed this book and I'm very excited to chat with you about it. Okay, so what is this book about? So this is obviously a vampire story and we're basically following our main protagonist Gabriel, who has been imprisoned. He's been incarcerated for a murder that we don't know much about, and he is basically being forced to tell his story by a vampire. Now this is set in a world where there has been some kind of event that has caused the sun to become obscured. It's known as Day's Death in the book, and what that means is vampires and cold bloods can walk the earth during the day, so there is an ongoing war between vampires and humanity, and the world building in this novel is absolutely fantastic. I think it is a great premise and setup for the book, and in this story we actually have several different timelines. So obviously we've got present day, which is when our main protagonist Gabriel is telling his story to the vampire, but we also have two flashbacks. So we've got the first flashback, which is Gabriel when he's a lot younger, in his teen years, and it's kind of a coming of age story. We get to see his kind of origin and how he becomes what is known as a Silver Saint, which is essentially a vampire hunter. So in this book we've got the Silver Saints, which are kind of like crusaders who fight vampires. So that's really cool to see his kind of coming of age story. And then we've also got another timeline, which is Gabriel when he is much older. I think he's 32, and it's basically him kind of leading up to the events of now, and in very simplistic terms it's sort of him trying to find a way to end Day's death. So I absolutely love that we have these different timelines. I thought it was fascinating seeing Gabriel at different stages in his life. So obviously when he's much younger, he's very different to when he's older. He is much more naive, he's much more kind of enthusiastic, and we kind of have that trope of someone who's kind of bottom of the pecking order trying to fight his way to the top, which is always fun to read about. And then we've got Gabriel when he's older, and we see him as a very kind of jaded character. He's very much kind of like a reluctant hero, and it's very clear that he's been through some kind of trauma and we're not quite sure what happened, and that kept me really hooked, and I was really keen to find out what on earth happened to this young teenager to turn him into the man that he is when he is older. So I loved that. I also feel like the different timelines meant that the pacing in this book was really good, because you kind of jump between the different timelines and it keeps you interested and kept the story refreshing. And I really feel like Jay Kristoff spent the right amount of time in each timeline for us to get enough to kind of become invested and to find out a lot about the world and the characters, but to kind of move on before it gets a bit boring, if that makes sense. So yeah, I just feel like the pacing in this book was done really well. An interesting thing about this book actually is that it's all written in quotations. So that's because obviously Gabriel is literally speaking his story to the vampire who's interviewing him, and I've not actually seen that in any other books before. So I know this kind of has a similar vibe to Name of the Wind. It's been compared to that book quite a lot, because obviously in Name of the Wind we've got our protagonist Kvothe, who is telling his story to a chronicler, but in Name of the Wind, when Kvothe is telling his story, it cuts to straight narrative, whereas in Empire of the Vampire it's all in quotation marks, which I really enjoyed because it meant that the interviewer could kind of cut Gabriel off at times to butt in, to ask more questions, to ask him to elaborate on things, and it just meant that we had had this really fantastic banter between the interviewee and the interviewer, which was actually one of the things that I enjoyed most about this book, and thing that I've not seen before, so I really enjoyed that. The chapters are nice and short, which I really appreciate, because this is quite a chunky and intimidating book, but I actually felt like I was flying through it quite quickly because of the different timelines, but also because of the nice short chapters. Another thing that I really enjoyed about the writing in this book is definitely the fight scenes, because they were so cinematic. As I said before, this book contains a lot of blood and guts. It's pretty graphic and gory, but what I will say is it came across very kind of dramatic and over the top, and I personally don't love like loads of blood and guts and stuff, but I did still really enjoy this book, and I think it's because it read very theatrical and just seemed to fit really well with the vibe of the book. What I will say is there's a lot of swearing in here, and when I say a lot of swearing, I mean literally almost every other word is a swear word, and I wasn't sure when I first started reading this book. I didn't think I was going to get on with it, but the more that I read on, the more I kind of got used to all the swearing, and it just kind of felt like Gabriel's voice in a way. And actually what I was pleasantly surprised about with this book is how funny it is at times. I think some of the creative use of swear words in here was actually hilarious, and I really wasn't expecting to find this book funny, because obviously it's a dark, gritty vampire story, so that was something that I was pleasantly surprised about. I was also pleasantly surprised about how much I cared about the characters and the relationships in this book. So this book has a heavy focus on lots of different types of relationships, really. Primarily I would say family is the main kind of focus in this story, but also friendships is a big thing in this book, and of course there's a little bit of romance as well. So we do have some sexy scenes in here as well. I will say sex scenes plus vampires leads to some pretty graphic scenes, as I'm sure you can imagine, so if that's not your cup of tea, then you might want to just back away from this book. But as I said before, the main focus is kind of on family and friends, really, or at least that was the main thing that I took away from this story, and I really enjoyed quite a lot of the side characters in this book. Obviously this book focuses on our main character Gabriel. It's his story that he's telling, and that is definitely the main focus of the story, but we do also have some interesting side characters as well. I think my favourite is probably Dior, but we also have like a grumpy mentor character that's always fun to read about, and we've got love interest, and we've got friendships, and we've got enemies, and they all feel very well realised and well fleshed out and thought through. Okay, so let's talk about world building, because that was absolutely one of the highlights for me, and I found it really fascinating finding out more about the history of the world, the way things worked. The vampire lore was really cool. There were different kinds of vampires or cold blood creatures in this book, and some of them are more kind of zombie-like, which is quite interesting, and then we've also got kind of more classic vampire type creatures as well in here, and of course finding out about the Silver Saints as well. That was really interesting. But I think what I enjoyed the most in this book was actually finding out about the religious system in this book, because that was so detailed. So Jay Kristoff has come up with this whole religious system in here with its own history, and I just found that absolutely fascinating. And I also found it really interesting kind of seeing different characters take on the religion, and finding out a little bit more about what each character believes in, because a big theme in this book is all about belief and faith, and kind of what happens if you lose faith or you lose belief and you lose purpose in your life. And I thought that was really fascinating and led to some really interesting character development. As I said before, the gothic atmosphere was absolutely present in this book. It had lots of gorgeous imagery in here. We had creepy woods, we had a forbidden library, which was really fun to read about. We had the place where all the Silver Saints kind of train, which was really cool. We had sort of castles, we had all sorts in here, and it was really well imagined. And I think a big plus for me was the fact that this story is actually illustrated. So we've got some beautiful illustrations in here that just added to that whole atmosphere and added another dimension to your reading experience, which was really cool and really unique, because I feel like you don't often find illustrated adult books. So yeah, these illustrations were done by the hugely talented Bon Orthwick, and as you can see, they're just stunning. And I highly recommend that you either read this book physically, or if you're going to read the audiobook, then I would suggest kind of following along with the book as well, because the illustrations really did add a big part to the enjoyment for me. So yes, all in all, I would highly recommend this book. I had a fantastic time reading it. It was thoroughly entertaining, and would highly recommend this to anybody who's looking for that dark, gritty vampire story that's also surprisingly emotionally impactful as well. So highly recommend this one. As always, I would recommend checking out the trigger warnings if you need to. I will have the Goodreads linked below and any information I can find. I hope that you really enjoyed this video. I'm fairly new to doing these review style videos, so I hope that it came across okay. But anyway, I guess I will see you next time with another video. Bye!